The North Atlantic wind howled across the deck of the USS Gerald R. Ford, carrying the sting of salt and cold air from the Norwegian Sea. It was supposed to be a clean, uneventful NATO drill, carrier operations, aircraft coordination, and interoperability exercises. Routine. Predictable. But 300 miles north of the Arctic Circle, nothing stays routine for long. At 0200 hours, AP-8A Poseidon from Patrol Squadron 16, War Eagles, picked up something strange. A faint, irregular sound echoing through the deep, low frequency and deliberate. It wasn't just ocean noise or a wandering whale. The sonar techs knew that hum. It was a Russian Akula-class submarine, and it wasn't alone. Command, this is Poseidon 2-1. We've got multiple contacts, possible submerged group, bearing 085, range 90 nautical miles. Recommending immediate classification. The response came from the carrier group's flagship operations center, calm but sharp. Copy. 2-1. Maintain track. You are weapons tight. Weapons tight, the phrase every naval aviator knows means watch, but don't shoot. Yet everyone listening understood that this was no exercise anymore. Within minutes, NATO's Maritime Command confirmed it. 3 Russian submarines, 1 Akula, 1 Yazan-class, and 1 older Kilo-class diesel-electric, had slipped out of the Barents Sea and were now prowling beneath NATO's largest carrier strike group. The message was clear. Moscow was watching. But NATO had its own message to send. By dawn, the Norwegian Sea had transformed into a chessboard of steel and sound. The U.S. destroyers USS Thomas Hudner and USS Roosevelt split formation, their /SQR-19 towed arrays spooling out like serpents into the deep. The British frigate HMS Portland moved in from the west, her sonar already painting a detailed acoustic map of the seafloor. The sea was alive with sound, sonar pings echoing through the cold water, bouncing off the thermoclines and ridges. Every ping meant something. Every silence was a question. At 0600 hours, the first cat-and-mouse exchange began. AP-8A flying out of Keflavik dropped its first string of sonobuoys, neat lines of floating sensors spreading across the search grid. Each buoy transmitted faint acoustic data back to the aircraft, forming a mosaic of the undersea battlefield. Within minutes, one of them came alive, a metallic vibration deep under the surface, steady and mechanical. Contact Sierra 1 confirmed, came the voice from the P-8's tactical officer. Bearing 215. Depth approximately 300 feet. Classified probable Yazan. Aboard the Thomas Hudner, sonar operators adjusted their arrays, narrowing the beam. Hudner to Ford, we have Sierra 1 in passive track. They're trying to sneak around our flank. Keep them busy, replied the strike group commander. Let's see how they like being hunted. The destroyers began shifting position, slow, deliberate turns that funneled the Russian subs into a tighter area. Above them, more Poseidons circled, dropping new sensors, flooding the zone with acoustic coverage. From the air, NATO was building a sound cage, invisible but inescapable. Meanwhile, deep below, the Russian captains were sweating. In the dim red glow of the Akula's control room, Captain First Rank Mikhail Kravchenko listened to the relentless pinging on his sonar displays. His helmsman whispered, "They've locked us, sir." "I know," Kravchenko replied, his voice low and tight. "Maintain course and depth. We don't surface unless ordered." He knew the Americans weren't going to fire. This was a humiliation operation, a demonstration. Every ping, every buoy, every sonar sweep meant another acoustic fingerprint logged into NATO's databases. From this day forward, every screw rotation, every hydraulic hum of the K-335 Jeopard would be recognizable anywhere on Earth. Above, the Gerald R. Ford remained unmoved. Flight operations continued uninterrupted. F/A 18 Super Hornets launched from the deck as if nothing were happening beneath the waves. The carrier didn't so much as change heading. That calm wasn't arrogance, It was power. It was NATO saying, "We're not concerned." By nightfall, the sea was a living orchestra of sound and steel. Helicopters skimmed the waves, their dipping sonars lighting up the ocean with pulses. The HMS Portland's Merlin helicopter picked up another contact, the Kilo-class, hiding near a thermocline pocket. Target submerged, shallow depth, attempting to mask behind thermal layer, the British sonar operator reported. "Mark and drive him out," came the calm reply. They did, dropping practice torpedoes that splashed into the water like thunder. The Russian sub dove deeper, but the message was sent, "We see you." For 48 hours, the NATO task force boxed the Russians into an invisible perimeter. They couldn't escape, couldn't hide. Each sub's acoustic signature was mapped, tagged, and logged. Every maneuver was recorded. By the end of the second day, Moscow ordered its boats home. Officially, Russian state media called it a successful intelligence-gathering operation. But inside the Pentagon, NATO's analysts were smiling. They knew the truth. 3 of Russia's most advanced submarines had been caught, tracked, and humiliated, and the USS Gerald R. Ford never even broke formation. Still, as the carrier turned south, the sonar operators aboard Hudner caught one last faint echo. A low, steady pulse. Not Russian. Not familiar. The operator frowned, adjusting the gain. "Command, we're still getting something at the edge of range." "It's different." The watch officer leaned in. "Different how?" "Non-standard signature," the operator replied. "Single hull resonance. Could be a deep-sea drone or something new." The officer hesitated. "Mark it. Keep tracking." The faint sound drifted in and out, too low for classification, too smooth to be natural. Whatever it was watching. And as NATO's ships began to withdraw, the mysterious contact shadowed them from the depths, silent, patient, and unseen. It didn't belong to any navy on record. And when it finally turned away, vanishing into the black water beneath the Arctic thermocline, the sonar screens went blank, leaving only questions and one undeniable truth. The next time NATO sailed north, they wouldn't just be playing cat and mouse with Russia. Something else was already waiting below. The sonar room aboard the Thomas Hudner was unervingly quiet now. Too quiet. The mysterious signal that had been pulsing minutes ago was gone, erased as if it had never existed. "Replay the last 5 minutes," ordered Lieutenant Commander Harper, the ship's senior sonar officer. The technicians moved quickly, scrubbing back the data feed and running it through the system again. The faint sound reappeared, a single low-frequency pulse, not mechanical in the usual sense, more like a resonant hum. It was steady, rhythmic, deliberate. "Run a cross-check against our acoustic library," Harper said. "Russian, Chinese, even experimental NATO drones." The result came back seconds later. No match found. Harper leaned closer to the screen, brows furrowed. "That's impossible. Everything has a match." "Not this," said one of the technicians quietly. "Whatever it is, it's built to disappear." Up on the bridge, the mood had shifted. The Hudner's captain, Commander Robert Mendez, had been briefed on the anomaly and now stood over the navigation console, watching the faint red blip fade in and out of the radar overlay. "Could be a false echo," suggested his XO. Mendez shook his head. "False echoes don't move like that. They don't shadow a formation." He turned toward the communications officer. "Patch me through to the Ford." Within moments, his voice was relayed to the operations room aboard the USS Gerald R. Ford, where Rear Admiral Samuel Reeve listened intently. The carrier's Combat Information Center glowed with blue light, filled with quiet murmurs and the soft hum of servers. "You're saying something is trailing the strike group?" Reeve asked, his tone measured. "Yes, sir," Mendez replied. "Submerged, low frequency, no ID. Not Russian. It's staying just beyond our active sonar range, like it wants to be heard but not found." The admiral's gaze narrowed. "Could be one of ours, an Allied test platform." "With respect, sir," Mendez said, "if it were ours, we'd have been told." That hung in the air. NATO didn't play games with classified assets in live exercises. Every platform, every drone, every submarine was logged. There were no ghosts at sea. At least, there weren't supposed to be. "Understood, Commander," Reeves said finally. "Keep a passive track. Do not engage. We'll coordinate with Allied Maritime Command for confirmation." But confirmation never came. By midnight, the unidentified contact was still there, weaving in and out of sonar range like a shadow. It didn't act like a sub. It didn't move in predictable lines or change depth like a vessel trying to evade detection. It simply hovered, watching. On board the HMS Portland, hundreds of miles to the west, British sonar teams were getting the same contact. They didn't know it yet, but the mysterious signal had now appeared in 3 separate quadrants, at ranges too far apart for a single craft. That meant one of 2 things. Either the signal was being broadcast, or there were multiple units moving in coordinated silence. "Could this be Russian ghost drones?" asked Lieutenant Murray, the British sonar officer. His commanding officer frowned. "If the Russians had this kind of stealth, we'd know." "No, this is something else. Something new." The eerie hum continued through the night, an unseen presence that seemed to shift with the current, trailing the NATO formation but never crossing into confrontation range. It wasn't hostile. Not yet. It was observant. Testing. And then, just before dawn, it vanished completely. No fade out. No distortion. Just gone. At the same moment, across NATO command centers from London to Norfolk, encrypted reports were already flying. All 3 task groups had experienced identical encounters, the same low-frequency hum, the same behavior, the same sudden disappearance. It wasn't a Russian provocation anymore. It was something larger. In the classified situation room aboard the Gerald R. Ford, Admiral Reeves stood in front of the digital tactical map. The blue icons of NATO ships pulsed gently. No red contacts remained. "Send all acoustic data to NRL and DARPA for analysis," he ordered. "Full encryption. No distribution outside command channels." His intelligence officer hesitated. "Sir, what should we classify this as?" Reeve thought for a long moment before replying. "Unknown undersea contact. Category black." Outside, the Norwegian Sea stretched endlessly, still and dark. The drills had ended. NATO ships began turning south, their engines low and steady. The sea was calm again, deceptively calm. But hundreds of meters below, far beyond sonar range, something stirred in the abyss. A faint light blinked once, soft, artificial, deliberate, and then disappeared into the eternal dark. Whatever it was, it had learned what it came to learn. And the ocean would never sound the same again. 3 days later, in a secure analysis lab buried deep beneath the Naval Research Laboratory in Washington, D.C., the hum of servers filled the air like distant thunder. Dr. Elena Varick, one of the Navy's top acoustic analysts, sat at her workstation staring at the waveform display looping endlessly across her screen. It wasn't like anything she'd seen before, not a biological source, not a machine, not an environmental anomaly. The low-frequency tone carried structure, intentional modulation buried inside the sound. She replayed it again, filtering the frequency layers. Beneath the main pulse, there was something faint, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat or a pattern of syllables. Her colleague, Dr. Amir Das, leaned over. "You hear it too, don't you?" Elena nodded. "It's not random. The intervals are precise, 4.7 seconds apart, consistent across all recordings. Whoever or whatever this is, it's communicating." "Communicating with what?" Das asked. "That," she said quietly, "is what scares me." Across the Atlantic, in Northwood headquarters, London, NATO's Maritime Command Center, Admiral Reeves' encrypted transmission arrived. The analysts there had already been running the same sound through their own systems, comparing it to known propulsion harmonics, oceanographic disturbances, and seismic data. Every result came back inconclusive. But one algorithm, designed for deep-sea data compression, flagged something unexpected. Hidden within the frequency was a repeating binary pattern. At first it looked like noise. But once converted to ASCII, a short string of characters appeared on the screen. ONS active. No one in the room said a word. "Is this a prank?" one of the officers muttered. "A test signal?" But the encryption headers confirmed it. The message came from within the recorded sonar file, not added afterward. That meant the signal itself had carried embedded data, a digital watermark from the source. Elena Varick, still in Washington, received the NATO copy hours later. She read the decoded phrase 3 times before looking up at her team. O.S. could stand for something. Oceanic Network System? Operations Naval Sensor. DOS frowned. There's nothing in our databases by that name. No classified project, no multinational effort. Elena's voice dropped to a whisper. Then someone or something just introduced itself. Meanwhile, back in the Norwegian Sea, the Thomas Hudner and HMS Portland had resumed normal patrol operations. The weather had worsened, with sleet hammering the decks and visibility dropping to near zero. Yet despite the storm, both vessels continued running passive sonar. At 0143 hours, the hum returned. Faint. Distant. The same low resonance as before, but now it was closer. The sonar operator on the Hudner stiffened. Contact reappeared, bearing 163, range 30 nautical miles. Depth unknown. The captain leaned over the console. "Confirm pattern." "Confirmed, sir," came the reply. "Same signature as before. Identical frequency." "Is it following us?" The operator hesitated. "Negative, sir. This time, it's stationary." The HMS Portland reported the same contact moments later, but to their instruments it wasn't one source. It was 4. "Multiple pings now," the British operator said. "Same intervals, same harmonics. It's like they're synchronizing." Admiral Reeve received the reports in real time. He ordered immediate containment protocols, sonar blackout, classified tracking, and strict radio silence. For the next 6 hours, the NATO vessels drifted silently, engines at minimum thrust, sensors focused on the abyss. At 0317 hours, all 4 contacts pulsed at once. The sound was so deep it vibrated through the hulls of the ships, rattling metal fixtures and trembling the waterline. Then, silence. The sonar screens flashed white, overloaded with acoustic interference. Every system went blind for 3 full minutes. When the displays came back online, the contacts were gone again. But this time, something had changed. Data from the sonobuoys began streaming corrupted signals, time-stamps rewritten, frequencies inverted, metadata rearranged. It was as if something in the deep had reached up through the water and touched the network itself. Dr. Varick received the raw data later that day. When she decrypted the interference logs, her hands went cold. There was another embedded phrase, faint but legible, stitched across the binary code. "We see you." She stared at the message, her mind racing. It wasn't just that someone was watching, it was that they wanted to be known. Back aboard the Gerald R. Ford, the strike group had turned south again, unaware of what had been found. But far below, beyond reach of light or signal, something vast was moving, slow, deliberate, ancient in design but terrifyingly modern in purpose. And as NATO's fleet disappeared over the horizon, the hum returned, fainter now, but spreading, echoing into the vast black beneath the Arctic ice. There were more of them, and they were awakening. The Pentagon's briefing room was dimly lit, the large screens along the wall showing looping sonar data and heat maps of the Norwegian Sea. Senior officials from the U.S. Navy, NATO Command, and DARPA sat in tense silence as Dr. Elena Verick presented her findings. "This is no anomaly," she began, her tone controlled but firm. "The signal wasn't a random acoustic reflection or environmental interference. It carried structure, encoded information, and it's capable of interacting with our systems." A Navy admiral leaned forward. "You're saying it hacked the sonobuoys?" "Not in the conventional sense," Verick replied. "It used sound modulation to corrupt the data stream at the physical layer. That shouldn't be possible. Not underwater. Not at these depths." The DARPA representative, a gray-haired man with a clipped accent, spoke up. "We've seen early-stage acoustic intrusion concepts. None have been successful beyond a few meters. Whatever this was, it's decades ahead." The room fell silent. Admiral Reeve, still fresh from the Ford's return, broke it. "We need eyes down there. Send a drone." Within 24 hours, the Navy's most advanced unmanned submersible, the Abyssal Echo, was loaded aboard the research vessel USNS Invictus and deployed north of Tromsø. The drone was a classified prototype, nuclear-powered, capable of diving below 30,000 feet, equipped with both optical and synthetic aperture sonar arrays. Its mission was simple on paper: follow the last known signal and record everything. By the second day, Abyssal Echo had descended below 4,000 meters, gliding silently through a canyon of black rock and cold currents. The sonar feed streamed back to the control room aboard the Invictus, painting the seafloor in eerie detail. Nothing. No vessels. No wreckage. No life. Then, a blip. "Contact, bearing 186, distance 600 meters, the sonar operator said quietly. On the screen, a shape appeared, metallic, smooth, cylindrical, maybe 25 meters long. It wasn't moving. "Could be debris," one of the analysts suggested. "Zoom in," said Verick, monitoring remotely from D.C. The camera feed sharpened as Abyssal Echo's floodlights illuminated the object. Its hull was covered in what looked like organic growth, but beneath that, metal. Polished. Seamless. No markings, no serial numbers, no corrosion. "Run a magnetic scan," Verick ordered. The data came back within seconds. Negative ferrous signature. Non-magnetic alloy. Possibly titanium composite. The admiral watching the feed frowned. "No known nation uses that structure. What are we looking at?" Before anyone could answer, the object emitted a pulse, faint, low frequency, identical to the signal from days earlier. The monitors flickered. The drone's telemetry began to lag. "Telemetry interference," the technician warned. "Signal degrading." "Pull it back," said Reeve sharply. "Now." The pilot reversed thrust, but the drone barely moved. The pulse intensified. The video feed distorted into static, then briefly showed something, a flash of internal structure, almost mechanical, before the connection severed completely. The Invictus's crew scrambled to re-establish link, but Abyssal Echo had gone dark. For 12 hours, the deep-sea network was silent. Then, without warning, the drone resurfaced, 20 nautical miles from its last known position. Its onboard systems were offline, its cameras fried, and its memory cores encrypted in a code none of the engineers recognized. Verick arrived in Tromsø within the day. She inspected the recovered drone herself. The hull showed no damage, but the alloy around its sensors had a strange microscopic pattern etched into it, as if it had been printed on. She ran her finger across the surface. It was smooth, unnaturally so. "It wasn't destroyed," she murmured. "It was rewritten." Back in Washington, analysts decrypted the first layer of data from the drone's black box. It wasn't video or sonar imagery. It was a waveform. A precise, repeating sound. The same hum. But this time, with a distinct sequence of tones forming an unmistakable pattern. The Naval Research Lab ran it through spectral analysis, decoding it into alphanumeric format. The output scrolled across the monitor slowly, line by line. Deployment trial successful. Phase 2 ready. The room froze. "Who authorized a trial?" one of the defense officials asked. "No one," Varick said quietly. "At least, not us." Moments later, the NSA intercepted encrypted Russian naval transmissions near Murmansk. The chatter referenced an unidentified deep asset and a data breach in their own submarine telemetry. In other words, they'd been hit too. Admiral Reeve turned toward Varick. "You think this was Russian tech gone rogue?" She met his gaze. "If it were Russian, they wouldn't be as scared as we are right now." The Admiral stood silently for a long moment, staring at the data feed. "Get me NATO command," he said at last, "and tell them we're no longer dealing with a naval incident. This is an undersea security breach, global scale." Far below, where the sea crushed metal and time itself slowed, faint lights flickered once more across the seafloor, small, controlled, and evenly spaced. 6 of them, moving in formation, and all broadcasting the same signal. In a hardened operations room at NATO Maritime Command in Northwood, England, a new designation had been added to the Global Threat Board. UUC-01 through UUC-06, Unknown Underwater Contacts. The icons glowed red along the map of the North Atlantic, positioned dangerously close to the transatlantic communication cable routes, the same arteries that carried 90% of the world's digital traffic. Rear Admiral Reeve stood with his arms crossed, eyes locked on the map. "They're heading straight for the primary data trunk," he said. "If those cables go down, every major economy feels it within hours." The British operations chief replied, "We're already rerouting commercial traffic, but the window's tight. We've got a 6-hour intercept before they reach the grid." NATO's response was swift and surgical. From Iceland, 2 P-8 Poseidons lifted off into the night, their bellies loaded with new generation ALFA sonobuoys and Mk-54 lightweight torpedoes set to passive mode. The U.S. Navy dispatched the USS South Dakota, one of its most advanced Virginia-class submarines, alongside the British Astute-class HMS Ambush. The French sent a Frem frigate north to provide surface coordination. The operation received the code name Silent Barrier. By the time the strike group reached its designated perimeter, the UUCs had already split formation, 3 veering north, 3 diving deep. Their acoustic signatures were faint, irregular, and unlike any known propulsion system. In the control room of the South Dakota, Commander Nathan Hall leaned over the sonar display. "They're not running propellers," he said. "It's like magneto-hydrodynamic propulsion. No cavitation, no trace." "Then how are we picking them up?" the sonar chief asked. Hall studied the readout, a strange, pulsing ripple pattern radiating from each contact. "They want to be seen," he said finally. On the surface, the Poseidons began their grid deployment. Dozens of sonobuoys dropped into the sea, forming a lattice of sensors stretching across hundreds of miles. Within minutes, the array was alive, sending real-time telemetry to NATO command. The first clear contact came at 0240 hours. One of the UUCs had altered course, heading directly for the undersea repeater station near the mid-Atlantic ridge. "Target 3 is accelerating," reported the tactical officer aboard the HMS Ambush. "Speed 32 knots, depth 8,000 feet. Too deep for engagement," Hall replied. "We need it higher." The South Dakota released an unmanned mini-sub, a Remus-type interceptor armed with a non-lethal EMP charge. Its job wasn't to destroy, only to disable. The drone dove silently into the black, its sonar beacon pulsing once every few seconds. As it closed the distance, the UUC suddenly changed behavior, slowing, turning, and emitting a low, harmonic sound. The drone's sensors went white. Telemetry vanished. Echo 1's down, Hall said through gritted teeth. They knew it was coming. Then, something unexpected, the UUC stopped moving. Completely. NATO command hesitated. No one wanted to strike first. If this was an experimental Russian system, any attack could escalate to open conflict. Admiral Reeves' voice came through the comm network. Hold fire. We go eyes only. Launch secondary surveillance assets. Moments later, from the belly of the Poseidon, a new prototype was deployed, the Hydra Ray, a classified autonomous sonar array capable of visual reconstruction through acoustic imaging. The picture that emerged was rough but unmistakable. The object was not torpedo-shaped like a drone. It was spherical, about 3 meters in diameter, with 6 radiating fins and a smooth outer hull of unknown composition. No markings. No seams. No visible ports. Jesus, one of the pilots whispered. What the hell is that? Back on the South Dakota, Commander Hall received an update from NATO HQ. Multiple intercepts confirmed. Contacts 4, 5, and 6 have halted. No hostile actions detected. Hall looked at the sonar chief. So they just stopped? The chief nodded. Yes, sir. Perfectly still. Like they're listening. For nearly an hour, the Atlantic held its breath. Then, one by one, the unidentified objects began to ascend, slowly, deliberately. At precisely 0315 hours, all 6 reached a depth of 500 meters and emitted the same synchronized pulse, a deep, resonant sound that shook every sonar channel across the region. Every ship and aircraft in the silent barrier network received the same interference burst, but within that burst, data analysts later found a short encrypted packet, a string of coordinates spanning from the Norwegian Sea to the Strait of Gibraltar. When decrypted, the pattern formed a path, not random, but deliberate. A network of undersea points connecting major maritime infrastructure sites, cables, listening arrays, and energy lines. Varick, back in D.C., stared at the coordinates in disbelief. They've mapped every strategic node in the North Atlantic. Whoever controls this network can see everything beneath the ocean, in real time. The NATO commander beside her exhaled slowly. And they just showed us they can get there any time they want. As dawn broke over the icy waters, the UUCs began to drift apart. The P-8 Poseidons tracked them until they faded off sonar one by one, vanishing into the thermocline. No confrontation. No debris. No trace. Just the message they left behind, and a map that no one outside the highest levels of NATO was cleared to see. In the following days, cable companies reported subtle latency spikes in transatlantic data flow. Nothing public, nothing catastrophic, just different. Varick's team at the Naval Research Lab continued analyzing the sound patterns. On the 5th night, the algorithm isolated a faint secondary layer hidden within the last pulse. It wasn't just coordinates. It was a date. 2 weeks in the future. In the days that followed, the world went on as if nothing had happened. No headlines, no leaks, no official statements. But behind closed doors, the Atlantic Alliance moved into a posture it hadn't used since the end of the Cold War. Inside NATO's secure underground command facility in Brussels, a hastily formed task group known only as Project Sentinel began running 24-hour shifts. Every member, scientists, cyber warfare officers, and undersea warfare specialists, was under direct oath of silence. Dr. Varick stood at the central table as a holographic projection displayed the decoded coordinates. They formed a web reaching across the North Atlantic, nodal points along the ocean floor where critical fiber optic cables, power conduits, and surveillance arrays converged. And at the bottom of the map, the final coordinate glowed in red. Grid point 91, she said. Depth, 9,000 meters. That's the deepest point within NATO's operational theater. Commander Hall, recently recalled from the South Dakota, frowned. That's beyond manned reach. What's there? Nothing, Varick answered. which makes it exactly the kind of place someone would hide something they don't want found. The date embedded in the signal was approaching, 13 days now. Across the Alliance, silent preparations began. The U.S. Navy readied 2 Seawolf-class submarines under the guise of maintenance trials. The British Ministry of Defence quietly reactivated its deep-sea vehicle Proteus. France contributed an autonomous undersea drone network, while Norway provided Arctic sensor coverage. Every move was classified above top secret. Even within NATO, only a handful of people knew what was being prepared. By day 6, intelligence intercepts began to filter in. Satellite imagery picked up unusual activity at Russia's Arctic bases, submarine pens bustling, specialized research vessels departing Murmansk and Severomorsk. Officially, Moscow called them oceanographic survey missions. No one believed it. Admiral Reeve gathered the Project Sentinel team for a secure briefing. "We have 3 Russian vessels moving toward the same coordinates," he said. "If they reach grid point 91 before we do, they'll control whatever's down there." Varick's eyes narrowed. "Assuming they're not as in the dark as we are." Reeve nodded. "Either way, we can't afford to find out." The USS South Dakota was redeployed under radio silence, running dark below the thermocline. With her went an experimental platform, Deep Star 9, a drone built to operate at extreme depth, fitted with synthetic aperture sonar capable of mapping terrain at atomic-level resolution. Its mission: reach grid point 91 first. As the fleet moved into position, NATO surveillance aircraft monitored every Russian movement. For the first time in decades, the Atlantic hummed with quiet aggression. Submarines shadowing submarines, destroyers maneuvering without acknowledgement, intelligence satellites switching to continuous orbit. On the 10th night, Deep Star 9 was launched. It descended through darkness and pressure that would crush steel in seconds. Its sensor feed streamed through a heavily encrypted satellite relay to the command center in Brussels. At 8,000 meters, the drone's imaging sonar began to outline something unnatural on the seabed. Not rock, not sediment. A structure, circular, perfectly symmetrical, almost 50 meters wide, buried under centuries of silt. Varick leaned closer to the screen. "That's no cable junction." The sonar sweep clarified further. A central dome surrounded by 6 equidistant pylons. Each emitted a low, rhythmic pulse matching the earlier acoustic signature. Reeve's voice was tight. "Can we confirm metallic composition?" "Unknown alloy," the operator replied. "Reflectivity beyond any known titanium or ceramic composite." Then, as if sensing observation, the pulses changed. The sonar display rippled once, twice, and Deep Star 9's telemetry froze. "Signal loss," the technician reported. "All systems unresponsive." Varick's pulse quickened. "Is it interference?" "No, ma'am," the operator said quietly. "It's feedback. The signal's bouncing back along our uplink." Within seconds, the Brussels command center's monitors began flickering with static. Lines of code filled the side screens, streaming faster than anyone could parse. "Cut the connection," Reeve ordered. But before they could, the main display stabilized, and for a brief moment a new image appeared. A view from Deep Star 9's camera, just before it went offline. The structure's surface had opened. And inside, light, cold, bluish, pulsing slowly, like a heartbeat. Then darkness. Silence filled the room. Varick finally spoke. "We've just announced ourselves," she said. "And whatever's down there knows exactly who we are." Reeve looked around the table. "Pull every Allied vessel back to a 100-mile perimeter. From now on, we assume active threat conditions." For the next 48 hours, sonar networks across the North Atlantic picked up intermittent, low-frequency signals unlike anything in their databases. They weren't random. They were responses, structured, layered, timed to NATO's own transmissions. On the 12th day, Russian reconnaissance drones began to vanish off radar near grid point 91. Two of their vessels abruptly changed course south, broadcasting emergency codes but providing no explanation. The 13th day dawned. All across NATO's undersea network, the unknown signal went silent. Varric stared at the last waveform on her monitor. "It's waiting," she said quietly. "The date is tomorrow." The morning of the 14th day arrived without fanfare. In Brussels, the secure command center was dim, hushed, and heavy with the kind of silence that only comes before something irreversible. Every Allied naval asset across the North Atlantic was on alert. The USS South Dakota and HMS Ambush maintained holding patterns along the perimeter. The French Normandy patrolled the surface above grid point 91, running sonar sweeps every 5 minutes. At 0700 Zulu, the unknown signal resumed. Not the deep hum from before. Something new. Short bursts, rhythmic, almost like sonar pings, but in a pattern no one recognized. They echoed through the water column in precise intervals. Varric listened through the playback feed, her hand steady on the console. "Those aren't random," she murmured. "They're directed, triangulated." Commander Hall, aboard the South Dakota, confirmed seconds later. "They're locking onto us. It's ranging sonar, but not ours." The Russian task group had also arrived. 3 submarines, Syeverodvinsk, Kazan, and Belgorod, were detected shadowing the southern approach. Their transponders were off, but NATO satellites caught glimpses of their wakes. For the first time, both superpowers were sitting above the same patch of abyss, each convinced the other had planted something beneath it. At 0803, all 6 of the original UUC coordinates reactivated across the Atlantic grid, each emitting synchronized pulses. Within moments, NATO's data feeds began to fluctuate. Secure military bandwidth spiked in latency, encrypted communications scrambled, and sonar buoys started transmitting ghost echoes. Reeves' voice came through the secure line. "They're jamming the entire North Atlantic sonar network. Everything east of Greenland is blind." Varric's team worked frantically to isolate the signal. They discovered that each pulse contained embedded code sequences, microscopic modulations hidden inside the acoustic waveforms themselves. It wasn't simple interference. It was data transmission, high-density, non-electronic, carried entirely through sound. "Acoustic data propagation," she said, barely believing it. "They're using the ocean as a medium. Whatever's down there is talking, and the nodes are listening." On the South Dakota, the crew watched as the sonar display bloomed with contacts, false returns, echoes, hundreds of them. For a moment, it looked like an entire fleet rising from the depths. Then, through the chaos, one steady contact appeared. Stationary. Massive. Right beneath grid point 91. "Depth 9,200 meters, the sonar officer reported. "That's the structure. It's powering up." "Powering up?" Hall repeated. "Thermal anomalies detected. Radiation flux increasing. It's emitting heat." Aboard the Russian Belgorod, a similar alert appeared on their systems. Both fleets, enemies by doctrine, now shared the same threat. Back in Brussels, Varric's display lit up with telemetry streams. Energy readings from multiple points along the seafloor converged on the central dome. She froze as the numbers stabilized. "It's drawing power," she said. "Not from an external source, from the ocean itself. It's using pressure and salinity as a generator." At 0830 Zulu, the structure transmitted another pulse, this one stronger, more defined. Every NATO submarine felt it as a low vibration through their hulls, like the ocean itself was resonating. Hall gripped the edge of the console. "That's not sonar. That's structural resonance." "What's it targeting?" asked his executive officer. "The seabed," Hall said. "It's destabilizing the sediment layer." Far above, surface vessels began reporting minor tremors. Undersea drones detected particulate clouds rising from the trench, spreading outward like underwater smoke. Reeve ordered immediate containment. Deploy deep charges, non-lethal. Shockwave only. I want that thing dormant. The South Dakota and Ambush released precision depth disruptors designed to neutralize undersea devices through concussive wavefronts. The charges detonated silently in the crushing darkness, rolling thunder that shook sensors across 200 miles. For a moment, the readings flatlined. The pulses stopped. Then, slowly, they came back. But now, the frequencies were different. Mirrored, inverted, as if the structure had adapted to the attack. In Moscow, Russian Naval Command went into immediate lockdown. Intelligence intercepts later revealed that their analysts had seen the same data as NATO and come to the same conclusion. It wasn't theirs. It wasn't anyone's. By late afternoon, both fleets had withdrawn to a safer distance, maintaining watch over the site but refraining from further interference. Varick, still in Brussels, sat before a bank of encrypted monitors. The last transmission from the structure had changed tone, lower, steadier, with layered harmonics that almost resembled patterns. Her AI-assisted analyzer decoded partial fragments. Not language, not numbers, but sequences, blueprints. What are we looking at? Reeve asked, standing behind her. Designs, Varick said softly. Not for the structure, for something larger. Whatever's down there is transmitting schematics. It's building a network across the ocean floor. Reeve's expression hardened. To what end? Before she could answer, a communication officer rushed in, holding a tablet. Sir, we've just received an encrypted burst from the South Dakota. They've picked up another signal, much closer this time. How close? The officer hesitated. Inside their own perimeter. Less than a kilometer off their port bow. Reeve turned sharply to the live feed. The sonar image appeared, small, sleek, fast-moving. A single new contact. No transponder. No known profile. Varick leaned in. It's not Russian. The contact circled once, then began to rise toward the surface. Commander Hall's voice came through the live comms, crackling with interference. It's ascending. We're maintaining passive. The line cut. Above them, the ocean erupted in a column of boiling water and light. Every sensor across the Atlantic registered it, an energy surge unlike anything seen beneath the sea. Varick stared at the data stream. It's awake, she whispered. The Atlantic sky was a cold, gray bruise. At dawn, reconnaissance satellites over the Norwegian Sea captured a series of images, low resolution, grainy, but enough to ignite every intelligence agency in the hemisphere. Something had broken the surface near grid point 91. It wasn't an explosion. It wasn't debris. It was rising, slowly, methodically, shedding water like a metallic leviathan awakening after centuries. On board the USS South Dakota, Commander Hall and his crew stared upward through the periscope. Above the waves, a faint shimmer glowed in the mist, impossible to define. It looked less like a vessel and more like a structure, smooth, circular, and seamless, rotating with silent precision. Recording everything, Hall said quietly. All channels. The object hovered half-submerged for nearly a minute before emitting a low, resonant hum. Sensors spiked. Every sonar, radar, and comms frequency within hundreds of miles went dead. The electromagnetic blackout was absolute. In Brussels, NATO's command screens went dark one by one. Varick's heart hammered as she watched the data collapse. It's wiping the networks, she said. It's not attacking, it's erasing. Erasing what? Reeve demanded. Everything it's ever touched. The blackout lasted exactly 87 seconds. Then, as abruptly as it began, the systems rebooted. Power returned. Data feeds flickered back to life. Every trace of the structure, Its coordinates, its energy readings, its telemetry, was gone. Wiped clean from all NATO databases, as though it had never existed. The only remaining signal came from South Dakota's emergency buoy, recovered hours later by a Norwegian patrol ship. Its last transmission contained 6 seconds of sonar imagery and a single line of metadata. Object ascended. Direction: north-northwest. Velocity: 22 knots. Subsurface. The trail led toward the Arctic, into international waters beyond tracking range. Within a week, Russia and NATO jointly declared a technical incident and agreed to suspend naval exercises in the Norwegian Sea due to environmental anomalies. No one outside the top clearance levels ever saw the classified footage. Dr. Varick returned to Washington for debriefing. She was met not by admirals but by civilians, men and women in plain suits, badges without names. They didn't ask her for theories. They asked for silence. That night, long after she left the Pentagon, she sat alone in her apartment, replaying the fragment of audio recovered from South Dakota's black box. It was faint, static, distorted, but within it she could still hear the final sound before the feed cut out. A deep, rhythmic pulse, impossibly regular, echoing like a heartbeat beneath miles of water. She isolated the waveform and slowed it down. Hidden within the frequency curve was a modulation she hadn't noticed before, short, deliberate, encoded. She let the decryption software process it overnight. By morning, the message appeared on her screen. Phase 2 underway. Initiating northern node. Her breath caught. She checked the timestamp embedded in the file. It wasn't from the day of the surge. It was from 12 hours after the blackout, long after the object had vanished beneath the Arctic ice. Varick stared out the window, toward the dark horizon beyond the Potomac. Somewhere far north, under a frozen ocean, something vast was still moving, quietly, methodically, building whatever came next. The world above remained calm, unaware, complacent. But beneath the cold Atlantic, the heartbeat continued. Slow. Steady. Closer.